ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नाम्ने गौरत्विषे नमः। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्त काञ्चन गौरांगी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Hare Krishna. Welcome. So today we are going to study from verse number 7, chapter 5, Karma Sannyasa Yoga, or action in Krishna consciousness. So verse number 7, we will chant first. योगयुक्तो विशुद्धात्मा विजितात्मा जितेन्द्रियः सर्वभूतात्मभूतात्मा कुर्वन्नपि न लिप्यते। Yoga-yuktah, engaged in devotional service. Vishuddha Atma, a purified soul. Vijita Atma, self-controlled. Jita Indriyaha, having conquered the senses. Sarva Bhuta, to all living entities. Atma Bhutatma, compassionate. Purvanapi, although engaged in work. Na, never. Lipyate, is entangled. Okay. Translation. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. So, we see this particular verse, and in the next few verses, there is a description of how a real jnani, or in other words, a karma yogi who works from the platform of Nishkama Karma Yoga in the mode of renunciation works. And what is his realization? And what is the results of his actions? All these things will be described in the next few verses. So it is a very important section. So in verse 7, this verse, we see that a few qualities are described of such a person. Vishuddhatma means purified. Vijitatma, that is self-controlled. Jitendriya, that is conquered the senses. Sarva bhutatma bhutatma, that is compassionate to all living entities. Now we see that when a person acts from the platform of Nishkam Karma, then he actually sees all the living entities as Atma, that is spirit soul. And that is why he understands that as everybody is the spirit soul, part and parcels of the Supreme, automatically he becomes dear to everybody. And he starts acting as servant to all living entities. Because everybody belongs to Krishna and he is a servant of Krishna. He realizes that. That is why he feels himself the servant of everyone. So, naturally, he becomes dear to all. As everyone is dear to him, so he also dear to everyone. And he is compassionate to everybody. So we see that his mind and senses are completely controlled. Why? Because he is considering everybody as part and parcels of the Lord, and he is trying to render some kind of service to everybody. So it is Sarva Bhuta Bhuta Atma, okay? Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma. So such kind of a person is loved by all and he is loving to everybody. So we see he is a purified person. He is in pure consciousness. Vishuddhatma. And as he is always in pure consciousness, his mind is controlled. Vijitatma. And we know that if the mind is controlled, then the senses are automatically controlled. So he is also Jitendriya, that is, who has conquered the senses. So when he acts in this way, he is never entangled because he is not acting for his own sake. He is always acting in divine consciousness, and he is not trying to fulfill any of his desires because it is not there. As he is Vijitatma, his mind is controlled. So he is pure by heart. So this is the situation of a person who works in the platform of Nishkama Karma. And naturally, we see as he is loving and compassionate to everybody, he cannot do any kind of offense to anybody. As we see, Arjuna will also fight the battle. And as we know, in the war, it is obvious that people will be killed. But as he is only carrying the orders of the Supreme Lord Krishna, so Arjuna is not going to be entangled. Because it is for the benefit of the society, he is engaged. He will be engaged in this fight. So this is the thing. And the next two verses, 8 and 9, we will chant together. नैव किञ्चित् करोमीति युक्तो मन्येत तत्त्ववित् पश्यन् शृण्वन् स्पृशन् जिघ्रन् नश्नन् गच्छन् स्वपन् श्वसन् प्रलपन् विसृजन् गृह्णन् उन्मिषन्निमिषन्नपि इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियार्थेषु वर्तन्त इति धारयन्. Na, never. Eva, certainly. Kinchit, anything. Karomi, I do. Iti, thus. Yuktaha, engaged in the divine consciousness. Manyata, thinks. Tattvavit, one who knows the truth. Pashyan, seeing. Shrinvan, hearing. Sprishan, touching. Jighran, smelling. Ashnan, eating. Gachan, going. Swapan, dreaming. Shwasan, breathing. Pralapan, talking. Visrijan, giving up. Grihnan, accepting. Unmishan, opening. Nimishan, closing. Api, in spite of. Indriyani, the senses. Indriyartheshu, in sense gratification. Vartante, let them be so engaged. Iti, thus. Dharayan, considering. Sorry. Translation. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. So we see that okay, just a minute. Yes. We can see that such activities, as mentioned in these two verses, are very natural activities that we must have to perform in our day-to-day life. As we see, Bhagavan said in chapter 3 that we cannot sit idle even for a while. We must perform the activities by our organs. So the material senses are engaged in their respective objects. This is the understanding that a perfect jnani has. Now we receive knowledge through the jnanendriyas, that is, and the jnanendriyas works under intelligence, that is buddhi. So pashyan, shrinvan, sprishan, jigran, all these things are done by this jnanendriyas. And the karmendriyas are also there to work, and these karmendriyas work under prana. So a perfect yogi knows all this, so he does not consider that I am doing something. He is a karta, he knows that. So the position is, the understanding of such a person is that this material body is also a gift of Krishna, the material body that we receive. So a person who is in perfect divine consciousness, he knows that his body also belongs to the Supreme Lord, or the Supreme, or the Absolute. So it should therefore be engaged in his services only. His services means, in vast sense, in the service of the entire world. And that is why he is compassionate to everybody, as we just studied in the previous verse. So he does not work in the consciousness of having material body and senses to satisfy his own material desires. He knows that Ishavasyam idam sarvam, everything belongs to the Lord. And as Bhagavan says in chapter 3, Mayi sarvani karmani sanyasya, surrender all the karmas unto me, then you will be free from the chain of action reaction and birth and death in turn. So we see that here, as he knows that the material activities are just the interactions of objects of the senses and the senses. So the senses and the objects of the senses are interacting with each other. So this is his perfect understanding. And he knows that the soul is always inactive, it is its nature. So he can remain aloof from the actions, which is actually dependent on 5 things. Actually, there are 5 immediate and remote cause behind any action. That is karta, karanam, adhishtanam, cheshta, and daiva. That is the doer, the work, the situation, the endeavor, and the fortune. So these are the 5 things. So he always perfectly conscious of his actual position. Jiberu Sharup hoy Krishner Nitya Dash. So he understands this and performs in all the activities in such consciousness. So he is always engaged in the divine activities. Though he is engaged apparently in all the actions, but as he is always conscious of his actual position, he can remain aloof. And as a result, he is always free. He is always free from the chain of action reaction, as we just said. So this is the situation. And as I was just saying, in chapter 3, Bhagavan says, Nahi kashchit kshanamapi jatu tishtatya karmakrit. We cannot stay a single minute, a single a fraction of a second also without any kind of work. Our eyes are opening and closing every single in every single second, even less than that. We are breathing, we are eating, sleeping, walking, we are sitting, everything, all the regular activities that we perform. So we are cooking, whatever we are doing. So everything is to maintain the body, at least to maintain the material body, we must go through certain sets of activities. But he knows that it is just an interaction between senses and the objects of senses. So we see that in the next verse, we see verse 10. ब्रह्मण्याधाय कर्माणि संगं त्यक्त्वा करोति यः लिप्यतेन स पापेन पद्मपत्रमिवाम्भसा. ब्रह्मण्याधाय कर्माणि संगं त्यक्त्वा करोति यः लिप्यतेन स पापेन पद्मपत्रमिवाम्भसा. Brahmani, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Adhaya, resigning, Karmani, all works, Sangam, attachment, Tyaktva, giving up, Karoti, performs, Yaha, who, Lipyate, is affected, Na, never, Saha, he, Papena, by sin, Padmapatram, a lotus leaf, Iva, like, Ambhasa, by the water. Translation: one who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful actions as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. If we have seen how the lotus leaves float in the water, we can understand this example very well. The lotus leaves are always floating in the water, but they are never wet. Some wax kind of material is there on the upper surface of the leaves. So if we pour water on the leaf, it will move on beautifully on the leaves, and the leaf will never wet. So this is the thing. So such is a person who works in this kind of consciousness and this with this realization, with perfect realization. So as we studied in verse 7, 8 and 9, and in verse 7, as we studied the qualities of such a person, a few qualities, and this particular word, Sangam Tyaktva Karoti Yaha. So when he is completely unattached with the actions and surrenders all the fruits of actions unto the Lord, then he is not affected by the fruits of activities. He is not affected by the fruits of activities. So we see that we discussed earlier also, we know about Ambarisha Maharaja, who tolerated everything, all injustice that is done by Durvasa Muni, and how he acted in the divine consciousness, remain unattached. And we know about Ranti Deva also. He was a person who once tasted by Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. He was a very charitable person. So he was doing some kind of penances at a time, and he did not have any kind of food for 45 or 48 days. And then he went through a test when he was just about to have some meal. Then some people came who asked for the food, and whatever he had, he gave away, and he himself fasted. So these are the things that we have learned from the pages of Śrimad Bhagavatam, and we can understand, we can actually get a clear picture of performing in the divine platform, performing in the Nishkama Karma platform, how people remain unattached. We know about Janaka Maharaja, we know about Yudhishthira Maharaja, we know about Parikshit Maharaja. So how they all were emperors who were always engaged outwardly in different actions, but internally they were completely renounced, in the mode of renunciation. So that is the suggested path by the Lord actually for all of us. So in the next verse, we see the Lord says, कायेन मनसा बुद्ध्या केवलैरिन्द्रियैरपि योगिनः कर्म कुर्वन्ति सङ्गं त्यक्त्वात्मशुद्धये. Kayena with the body, manasa with the mind, buddhya with the intelligence, kevalaihi purified, indriyaihi with the senses, api even, yoginaha Krishna conscious persons, karma actions, kurvanti they perform, sangam attachment, tyaktva giving up, atma of the self, Shuddhaye for the purpose of purification. Translation: the yogis, abandoning attachment, act with the body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses only for the purpose of purification. For the purpose of purification. So in this verse, this particular word, Atma Shuddhaye, is very important. In the second line, the last part. Sangam Tyaktva Atma Shuddhaye. So working for purification. This is the theme of this verse. Atma Shuddhaye. So we see the body, mind, intelligence, senses. These are always employed in some kind of work. Now our position is we have to understand that following in the footsteps of the great persons we just discussed about whom. So we have to follow in their footsteps in this way that our body, mind, intelligence, senses, everything is to be employed in the service of the Lord, in the service of the entire world, because it is His creation. So serving the world also is serving the Lord. So in every possible way, we have to be in the fixed in the understanding of working in the mode of renunciation, working in the mode of surrender, and working in the mode of devotion. So this is very important, as these great people did. And we have to understand that so why these people who are completely unattached to everything, why they acted in such beautiful way? As we just said, they were emperors because they knew that God is not dependent. God is not dependent on us. He is not in the need of any kind of service. It is our opportunity. We are actually given the opportunities to help others by the Lord. Why? Not to improve them, but to improve ourselves. So this understanding they had, and we also have to understand this. And we also have to understand point number 3, that I am not indispensable. God has thousands of other means to provide help to everybody who is in need. So if I have been given the opportunity to serve anybody, it is just for the sake of my improvement, not for anything else. And that is why it is better to forget. If we have also rendered some kind of help to anybody, we need to forget that as early as possible. So these 4 things we need to remember. As the great people did, we also have to follow in their footsteps. So this is the thing. And in the next verse we see, युक्तः कर्मफलं त्यक्त्वा शान्तिमाप्नोति नैष्ठिकीम् अयुक्तः कामकारेण फले सक्तो निबध्यते. Yuktah, one who is engaged in devotional service. Karma phalam, the results of all activities. Tyaktva, giving up. Shantim, perfect peace. Apnoti, achieves. Naishtikim, unflinching. Ayuktaha, one who is not in Krishna consciousness. Kamakarena, for enjoying the results of work. Phale, in the result. Saktaha, attached. Nibadhyate, becomes entangled. Translation. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Okay, so in this verse we can see that the Lord is giving an example of two different categories of people. One is yuktaha and the second is ayuktaha. In the first line and second line we see yuktaha means who is in union with the divine, and ayuktaha means who is not in union with the divine. So yuktaha who is connected with the Lord, he works for Atma Shuddhe, for the purification, and he acts for everybody. He is compassionate to everybody, and he has no desire to satisfy his own senses. So his mind is controlled, his senses are controlled. So such a person, his actions are in the supreme platform, the absolute platform. So he actually receives eternal peace, unadulterated peace or unflinching peace, shantim naishtikim, unflinching peace he attains. Because why he is able to attain unflinching peace? Because as we just said, in this kind of a platform, he is performing all the activities, and as he has no anxiety over the results of the actions that he is performing, so he is certainly in a liberated state, and therefore he is filled with peace of mind and peace of divine consciousness. So, but on the contrary, we can see in the next line, ayuktaha kamakarena phale sakto nibadhyate. So he is phale sakto, he is attached to the fruits of activities. Because he is greedy, he is always after satisfaction of his own desires. So his mind is not controlled, his senses are not controlled. He is not compassionate to the entire world, because he cannot see that every living entity is spirit soul. They only consider the outer shields of the entities, of the living entities. So we see they are therefore attached to the results of the activities automatically, and they are always functioning in the concept of duality. They cannot see that every living entity is the spirit soul and part and parcels of the Lord, and that is why they are equal. They are equal in nature. And that is why anxiety is always their friend. They always are in the state of anxiety, and definitely that is why they are entangled in this material world, in the chain of action and reaction and birth and death. So we see that from these 6 verses, verse 7 to verse 12, these are very important verses from which we can learn how to perform in this platform of Nishkama Karma. So, three things we have learned from these verses. That is, how such a person acts, what is his realization, and what is the result of his realization and action, or realization based actions. So we see that how he acts, briefly, his mind and senses are completely controlled. His mind and senses are completely controlled. He acts without attachment, that is, without the desire of results or outcome. He acts with body, mind, intelligence, and senses, everything for the purification, Atma Shuddhe. And his realization is that he knows that the soul is inactive. Soul is inactive. It does not perform any activities. So it is the body and the mind which is actually in the platform of action. So material activities are interaction between the senses and the objects of senses. This understanding is very clear to him, and that all the living entities are part and parcels of the Lord. So these understandings are very clear to him, and as a result, the actions he performs is always in the divine platform. Like he cannot commit any sin. It is not possible, as he is seeing everybody as the part and parcels of the Supreme, and that it is Super Soul with whom we are connected. All the spirit souls are connected, Jivatmas are connected. So we are all on the same platform, and the material activities are just interactions between senses and objects of the senses. So there is no question of incurring sin by such a person. So he is never entangled also, and as a result he attains unflinching peace, Shantim Naishtikim. So this is the learning that we have received from these 6 verses that we studied today. In the next day, we will move on to another very important section of this chapter and of this scripture also. Okay, so we will conclude today's session. वंशाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।